Okay, greetings one and all, and welcome to this math video. In this math video, we'll be considering rules of exponents. Rules of exponents. Let's begin. Let's consider this question. It says 2 to the third power minus 5 to the power of 0 multiplied by 3 to the power of -1. Okay, first let's consider 2 to the power of 0. Well, 2 to the power, first let's consider 2 to the third power. 2 to the third power is 8, and we know that because 2 to the third power is 2 times 2 times 2, and 2 times 2 times 2 is definitely 8. Next, we have 5 to the power of 0. Well, 5 to the power of 0, you can put this in your calculator. If you put 5 to the power of 0 in your calculator, you will definitely get 1. And then we have 3 to the power of -1. The rule is, if you have a number raised to the power of -1, then you can write that expression as 1 over the number. So let me say the rule again. If you have a number raised to the power of -1, you can write that number, the number which is raised to the power of -1, you can write it as a fraction as 1 over that number. So here we have 3 to the power of -1, and so we can write it as 1 over 3. If we had 5 to the power of -1, we could write it as 1 over 5. If we had 6 to the power of -1, we can write it as 1 over 6. If we had 7 to the power of -1, it'd be 1 over 7. That's the rule that you need to know. The next rule you need to know is 5 to the power of 0, and any number to the power of 0 is going to be 1. That's an important rule. Okay, so now we have 8 minus 1 times 1 over 3. We're definitely going to multiply before we subtract, according to PEMDAS. We always multiply before we subtract. And so 1 times 1 over 3 is definitely going to be 1 over 3, because 1 times anything is the number itself. So 1 times 9 is 9, 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 3 is 3, 1 times 4 is 4. So anything times 1 is going to be itself. And so we say 1 times 1 over 3 as 1 over 3. Next, we got to subtract these two. You have 8 minus a third. You can do it manually, or you can use a calculator. I really encourage you to use a calculator when doing these questions. And when you use a calculator, you get 7 and 2 over 3. You get the mixed number 7 and 2 over 3 as your final answer. Okay, let's move on to the next question. We have to evaluate these numerical expressions. So we have 5 to the power of 3. A 5 to the power of 3 is just 5 times 5 times 5, 5 3 times. And so it's going to be 125. Now 9 to the power of 0, remember, anything to the power of 0 is just 1, okay? And here you can use a calculator too. You could also use a calculator. These are calculator questions. Use a calculator, but make sure shoulder working, all right? Remember, in the BGCSE exam, you are allowed to use a calculator. Now we have 2 to the third power, or all raised to the power of 2. Let's first deal with this 2 to the third power. We know that 2 to the third power is 8, and so we're going to keep that raised to the power of 2. What is 8 to the power of 2? 8 times 8, and 8 times 8 is definitely 64. So the answer here is 64. Now we have 4 to the power of -2, all right? And that's going to be 1 over 4 squared, and that's the rule. If we have a number raised to the power of a number, it's going to be, you're going to put it over 1, and you're going to remove that negative sign and put the positive, and you'll remove the negative sign, as in this case, and you'll just be left with the number. So 4 squared. So it's going to be 4 squared, but it's going to be as a fraction, 1 over 4 squared. And that's how you deal with this. So if we add 3 to the power of -2, so 3 to the power of -2 is going to be 1 over 3 squared. If we add 6 to the power of -2, it's going to be 1 over 6 squared. If we add 7 to the power of -2, it's going to be 1 over 7 squared. Just like that. Now, what is 4 squared? 4 squared is definitely 16. And then when we divide 1 by 16, we get 0.0625. And that's how we get that answer. Moving right along, we have another question. We have 2 to the third power minus 5 to the power of 0 times 8 to the power of -1. This is very similar to the one we've done before. We know that 2 to the third power is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. We know that 5 to the power of 0 is 1, and any number to the power of 0 is also 1. And we know that 8 to the power of -1 is 1 over 8, because a number raised to the power of -1 is going to be 1 over that number. So now we have 8 minus 1 times 1 over 8. We multiply. Always we multiply before we subtract. 1 times 1 over 8 is just 1 over 8. And so we have 8 minus 1 over 8. We can put this in our calculator, and our answer is 7 and 7 over 8. Moving right along, we have another question. It says 6 to the third power. 6 to the third power is definitely going to be 6 times 6 times 6, which is 216. 7 to the power of 0 is going to be equal to 1. And 0.3 squared is going to be equal to 0.3 times 0.3, which is 0.09. Because 0.3 squared, that means you multiply it twice. So you multiply by itself, and that means that 0.3 is going to be seen twice. So 0.3 times 0.3 is going to be 0.09, and that's the answer here. Okay, let's move on to the next one. This one says 3 to the power of 4. The 3 to the power of 4 is definitely 3 4 times. So it's going to be 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, and that's 81. You can put in your calculator. 7 to the power of 0, and any number to the power of 0 is going to be 1. This one is very important. This one is very important because we have 64 raised to the power of 1 over 3. You can just put in your calculator just like that, and your calculator will be able to give you the answer. That's for sure. But you can represent it in a different way, right? And you can look at it in a different format, and that's the format I'm going to look at it. Remember, like I said, if you put in your calculator wholesale, you will get the answer, and that's no problem. But there's another way we can look at it, because whenever you have fractional exponents, so here it is a fractional exponent because we have a fraction as an exponent. Whenever you have that, you can, whenever you have something like this, or a fraction exponent, you can put it to the nth root, all right? So for example, here, you look at the denominator, and the denominator tells you what root you'll be looking at. So if this denominator was 2, we know he's looking at the square root. If this denominator was 4, we know we're looking at the fourth root. If this denominator was to the fifth power, if this denominator was 5, we're going to be looking at the fifth root. But since this denominator is 3, that means we're looking at the cube root. So this 6 and 1 over 6 to the power of 1 over 3 can be written as the cube root of 64, all right? As long as this number is 1 on top, you can write it like this, the cube root of 64, all right? If this number was 1 on top and you add 2, it's going to be the square root of 64. If this number 1 on top and you add like 5, it's going to be the fifth root of 64, all right? So here it's the cube root of 64, and the cube root of 64 is definitely 4. That's an important rule that you need to know as well. Or you can just use your calculator, 64 to the power of 1 over 3, and you'll still get 4 without knowing this. Now we have 5 to the power of negative 2. 5 to the power of negative 2 is going to be 1 over 5 squared. Like we said, if we add 6 to the power of negative 2, it's going to be 1 over 6 squared. If we add 7 to the power of negative 2, it's going to be 1 over 7 squared. If we add 8 to the power of negative 2, it's going to be 1 over 8 squared. It's the same thing. And so it's going to be 1 over 5 squared. We have 5 squared. 5 squared is 25. And 1 divided by 25 is 0.04. I must emphasize that this is only for 1 point. So you can put this in your calculator and you can still get it right, because 5 to the power of negative 2, put it in your calculator, you'll get 0.04. So you don't need to do this working, and you don't need to do that if you don't remember it. You can go to your calculator, because these things are only for 1 point, and you'll still get it right. Okay, let's move on to this one. Notice here we have 3 to the third power minus 7 to the power of 0 multiplied by 2 to the power of negative 1. We know that 3 to the third power is 3 times 3 times 3. And 3 times 3 times 3 is definitely 27, because 3 times 3 is 9. Multiply 9 by 3 is 27. 7 to the power of 0 is 1, and any number to the power of 0 is 1. And then 2 to the power of negative 1 is 1 over 2. And so we have 27 minus 1 times 1 over 2. What we can do is we can multiply. All right, so we can multiply 1 by 1 over 2. That's going to be 1 over 2 here. And we can subtract 27 minus a half. It's going to be 26 and a half. Okay, let's move on to this one. Here we have 3 to the power of 0, and 3 to the power of 0 is definitely 1. Any number to the power of 0 is 1. Here, if you notice, we have, this is very important here, we have the same base, so the same base is A, all right, but different powers. Whenever you have the same base, all right, and you're multiplying, all right, you can add the powers. So that's the rule right there. Same base, all right, and you're multiplying, you can add the powers. And so it's going to be A to the power of 4 plus 3. All right, so A to the power of 4 plus 3 is going to be A to the power of 7, because 4 plus 3 is definitely 7. And then we have 1 over 4 squared. Now 1 over 4 squared means 1 over 4 multiplied by 1 over 4. And so 1 over 4 times 1 over 4, we know 1 times 1 is 1, and 4 times 4 is 16. And and that brings us to, well, we can, I mean, 1 over 16 is fine. We can also simplify that further if you wanted to. You can write 1 over 16 as 1 over 16 if we divide it. In fact, let's do that. 1 over 16, um, that's going to be equal to, because we don't want to leave it as a fraction. So 1 over 16 is going to be equal to 0.0625. And the way I got it is I just simply divided. I divided 1 by 16. Okay? So 1 over 16 is 0.0625. Now you can do that, or you put this in a calculator, but no, this is 2 points. So they want to see some sort of working here. So definitely show your working for this one. Let's move on to the next question here. We have 3 to the power of negative 2, okay, multiplied by 81 to the power of 1 over 2. Remember I said that if the numerator is 1, then if we look at the denominator, right, that's going to be the square root, right, if the numerator is 1. And so that's very important. So here we're looking at the square root of 81, all right? Like we said, fraction exponents can be written as roots. So if the top number is 1 and the bottom number is any number like 3, 2, any whole number, 3, 2, 4, then that'll be the square root. If it was 3, it's going to be the cube root. If it was 4, it's going to be the fourth root. So let's remember that. So 81 to the power of 1 over 2 is the square root of 81, okay? And then 3 to the power of negative 2 is going to be 1 over 3 squared. And so we know that 3 squared is 9, right? 3 squared is 9 because that's 3 times 3. And the square root of 81 is definitely 9. So now we have 1 over 9 times 1 over 9. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to put this 9 over 1 because we're writing it as a fraction. And any whole number can be written as a fraction just by putting it over 1. So we have 1 over 9 times 9 over 1. And we multiply. 1 times 9 is 9. And 9 times 1 is 9. And so that's going to be equal to 9 divided by 9. And 9 divided by 9 is definitely 1. Moving right along, well, that is the last question. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video.